Have you ever had a moment in your life where maybe it was a phone call or an email or just a sudden turn of events where the reality was so good, so completely overwhelming that your brain just, refused to process it?
Oh, absolutely.
Like that legitimate pinch me feeling where you're walking around thinking, there is no way this is actually happening. I must be asleep right now.
Yeah, it's a really rare feeling. And honestly, I think biologically, we're wired to scan for threats,
Yeah.
right? Not miracles.
Right.
So when the absolute best case scenario actually happens, the thing maybe stopped hoping for years ago because it just hurt too much,
Yeah.
it's disorienting. It feels almost like a hallucination. It just doesn't compute with your baseline reality.
Exactly. It's like cognitive dissonance, but the happy version.
Yeah, the happy version.
And that is exactly where we're starting today. We are taking a deep dive into Psalm 126. Now, for anyone listening who thinks, oh, yeah, I know this one, I really want you to stick with us. It is a tiny piece of text. I mean, it's only 6 verses long.
All right, very short.
But the sources we're looking at today suggest this might actually be one of the most psychologically complex poems in the entire ancient library.
It really is. And what's so fascinating about this text, based on the research we've pulled, is that it captures the full spectrum of the human experience in about, 30 seconds of reading time.
Basically, yeah.
It starts with that surreal, dreamlike joy we just talked about. But then, and this is the part people often gloss over, it moves right into the grit of struggle, of risk, and the absolute necessity of patience.
It's basically a masterclass in emotional whiplash, but in the most beautiful way possible. The context here, from our historical sources, is that this was likely written right after a massive geopolitical shift, which was Israel's return from exile in Babylon. They'd
Yeah.
been captives for 70 years. An entire generation had been born in captivity. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, the empire collapses, the policy changes, and they're going home.
And that context is non-negotiable if you want to understand the text. I mean, imagine being a prisoner of war for your entire adult life, and then one day the gates just open.
Just open, no fight, no negotiation.
Exactly. But what we want to do today is look at the why. Why was this specific song preserved? Our sources suggest this isn't just a history lesson about a specific ancient migration.
Right. It's more than that.
It's a blueprint. It's a
Yeah.
guide for how we handle the in-between times in our lives. How do you balance extreme gratitude for what happened yesterday with the desperate, almost panic-inducing need you still have right now?
That is the question. Because usually we think it's one or the other, right? You're either happy or you're stressed. But this text says you can actually be both simultaneously. So let's unpack this. We're going to walk through these 6 verses, and I think you're going to be surprised by how relevant this ancient poetry is to, say, your career trajectory, your anxieties, or even raising a family today.
Let's dive in.
Okay, verse 1. When the Lord turned again the captivity of Zion, we were like them that dream. That is the line that grabs me every single time, like them that dream.
It implies a total state of shock.
Yeah. It doesn't say we were happy. It says we were unconscious, essentially. We were dreaming. The source material describes this as a dramatic reversal of fortune.
It's the definition of a breakthrough that you didn't earn.
Yeah.
You have to remember, for the people originally singing this, captivity was the status quo. They thought they were going to die in Babylon.
Right.
And then overnight, the script completely flips. The source notes highlight that the wisdom here is in the recognition of agency. They didn't say, look how well we negotiated our release.
No, not at all.
They recognized it as divine intervention. It was just too big to be human.
And the reaction is pure visceral release. We see that in verse 2. Then was our mouth filled with laughter and our tongue with singing. I just appreciate that imagery so much. It's not a polite, golf clap kind of smile.
Oh, no.
He says their mouth was filled with laughter. That sounds loud. It sounds messy.
It's totally uncontainable. It's a physical manifestation of relief. But there is a detail in verse 2 that I think is incredibly insightful. And honestly, I've read this psalm a dozen times and completely missed it until I went through these notes.
Oh, really? What's that?
The text shifts perspective. It says, then said they among the heathen, the Lord has done great things for them.
The heathen, so the nations around them, the people who didn't subscribe to their theology at all.
Exactly, the skeptics. The outside observers. This is a huge point in our research. Deliverance, when it's real, it becomes visible.
Ah.
The restoration was so undeniable that the people who had zero stake in the outcome, or maybe even people who were openly hostile to them, They had to comment on it.
That is fascinating. So it
Right.
wasn't just an internal, I feel good inside spiritual moment. It was a tangible geopolitical reality.
Yes, it's joy acting as a public testimony.
Mm.
When God does something massive in your life, it echoes outwardly. The source material phrases it so beautifully. Gratitude becomes proclamation.
I love that.
You don't even have to force the conversation. The change in your circumstances just speaks for itself. The world looks at you and says, okay, something totally unexplainable just happened to you. We can't deny that.
And then in verse 3, the people confirm it. They basically agree with the outsiders. The Lord hath done great things for us, whereof we are glad. It's this beautiful echo chamber of confirmation.
Yeah, it's a moment of total alignment. Internal reality matches external observation. Everything is just perfect.
And here is where the record scratches the psalm doesn't end there. If it ended at verse 3, it'd be a Disney movie. Roll the credits, everyone is perfectly happy forever. But verse 4 takes this really weird, sharp turn.
It really does. And this is where the deep dive really begins. This is where it gets incredibly real for us today.
Immediately after shouting about how their captivity was turned, the psalmist prays in verse 4, "Turn again our captivity, O Lord."
It sounds like a complete contradiction, doesn't it?
Completely. I mean, didn't you just tell me your mouth was full of laughter because you were free? Why are you asking to be freed again? Are they confused? Did they get captured again in the span of a single verse?
No, they aren't confused. They're just being realistic. This brings us to a core concept from the sources called continuing need. The expert analysis here is that restoration is rarely a magic toggle switch. It's a process.
Right.
Think about it historically. Yes, they were allowed to go back to Jerusalem. That was a huge miracle.
Mm-hmm.
But when they got there, the city was a total ruin.
Just rubble.
Exactly. The walls were down. The fields were overgrown with weeds. Squatters were actually living in their ancestral homes.
Ah, okay. So the event of freedom had happened, but the reality of restoration was really just starting.
Precisely. The big breakthrough happened. They were home, but the work wasn't finished. In fact, the hardest work was just beginning. And I think this validates the feeling of, I've been saved, but I still really need help.
That is so relatable. It's like you get the new job. That's the dream moment, the breakthrough. But then 2 weeks later, you're drowning in the training. You don't know the software, and you're questioning if you're even qualified to be there.
Or take health as an example. You recover from a long illness. The doctor finally says you're cured. That's the miracle, right? That's verse 1. But you still have to go to physical therapy for 6 months to rebuild your muscle because you've been stuck in a bed for a year.
Yeah.
You can be grateful for the cure and desperate for strength at the exact same time.
That's a really great distinction. Grateful for the past, but desperate for the future. And the psalmist uses very specific geography here to explain that desperation as the streams in the south.
Right. Now, if you aren't a geography nerd, you might just gloss right over this. But the south here refers to the Negev. It's a desert region in the southern part of Israel.
So, extremely dry, arid.
Bone dry. For most of the year, the riverbeds, the wadis in the Negev, are just dust and rocks. If you look at them in July, you'd say, there is zero life here. This is a complete wasteland. But the topography there is totally unique. When the rains come in the mountains, which can be miles and miles away, these dry beds can fill up with flash floods in a matter of minutes.
Just sudden, rushing water.
Violent, sudden, life-giving water rushing right into a dead place. It changes the landscape instantly.
So when they pray, "Turn our captivity like the streams in the south," they aren't asking for a gentle drizzle or a garden hose.
No, they're saying, Lord, we are back in the land, but our situation is incredibly dry. We have no economy, no safety, no crops. We need a flood. We need you to rush in and bring life to this dead ground, and we need you to do it right now.
It's a plea for urgency. It's a very bold prayer.
It is bold, and it shows that gratitude for the past gives you the confidence to ask for what you need right now. They aren't complaining. They're leveraging their history with God to ask for a future.
Kind of a you did it before, so do it again mentality.
Exactly. You brought us back from Babylon. Now please bring the water to the desert.
Okay, so we move from this intense prayer for water to probably the most famous verses in this entire text. If you've ever heard this psalm quoted in a sermon or seen it printed on a coffee mug, this is the part you know. Verses 5 and 6.
The agricultural metaphor.
Right. They that sow in tears shall reap in joy.
This is such a profound shift in imagery. We went from dreaming and laughing to sowing and weeping.
It's heavy, and honestly, it's a bit counterintuitive. Usually when we use farming metaphors in our modern culture, it's really positive. You're planting seeds, it's springtime, the birds are chirping, it's a fun hobby. Why are these guys crying?
That is the million-dollar question. The source material really highlights this concept of sowing in tears. We have to look at the economics of the ancient world to truly understand the tears. This isn't hobby gardening. This is subsistence farming.
Meaning, if the crop fails, your family doesn't eat.
Right. But it's even higher stakes than that.
Mm-hmm.
To sow seed, you have to take grain wheat or barley that you could actually grind into flour today to make bread for your hungry family. You have to take that certain food, walk out into the dirt, and throw it away.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought about the literal cost of the seed. You are burying your current survival in the ground.
Hoping it turns into something more later. But in the moment, it feels like death. You are taking the little bit you have and letting it go into the cold ground. That is exactly why they are weeping. It's an act of terrifying faith. It's a massive risk.
That changes the entire vibe of the verse for me. It's not just, I had a bad day while I was out working in the field. It's, I am terrified that this sacrifice won't actually pay off.
Exactly. But here is the insight that just blew my mind in the notes. The text says, "He that goeth forth and weepeth, bearing precious seed." The weeping is happening, yes, but the going forth is also happening.
The motion continues despite the emotion.
That's the huge takeaway. The tears do not invalidate the work. You can be sad and still be sowing. You can be grieving and still be building. In our modern world, we have this idea that we need to process our feelings before we can be productive. Like, I need to get to a really good headspace, and then I'll start rebuilding my life.
Right. Once I stop crying, then I'll finally go back to work.
And this ancient wisdom says, no. You plant while you cry. Because if you wait until you feel confident to plant the seed, you can miss the entire season. The harvest doesn't care about your feelings. It just cares about the seed being in the ground.
That is tough love, but it is incredibly encouraging. It means I don't have to fake being happy to do the right thing.
You absolutely don't. You just have to do the right thing. The seed knows what to do, even if your hands are physically shaking when you drop it.
And what a payout it promises. Verse 6 ends with, "Shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him."
Doubtless. That's the word you really want to circle. It implies a spiritual law. It's cause and effect. If you stay faithful to the sowing, even when it's hard, even when it's tearful, the harvest is inevitable.
Just to clarify for any non-farmers listening, what exactly are sheaves?
A sheaf is a bundle of cut grain stalks.
Mm-hmm.
It represents the finished product. It's the tangible, heavy, undeniable proof that the painful work was worth it. The imagery here is someone coming back from the field, carrying so much abundance that the sorrow of the planting is completely overshadowed.
It's really a lesson in endurance.
It is. The sources explain that this teaches us that tears aren't wasted. They're actually part of the watering process. It connects perseverance directly to joy. Hope, in this context, isn't a passive feeling where you sit on your couch and just wish things were better. Hope is a verb. Hope is the act of planting the seed when the ground looks dry and you feel entirely empty.
That is huge. So let's pivot a bit here. We've unpacked the text, the dream, the sudden floods, the risky seeds. But the big question we always ask on this deep dive is, so what? What does this actually mean for us today in a modern economy with modern problems? How can this information strengthen our trust and our relationship with God?
Well, looking at our application notes, there are 4 really strong takeaways here that directly impact how we navigate stress and trust God today.
Okay, hit me with the first one.
The first one is that memory fuels hope.
Like remembering those dreamlike days from verse 1.
Exactly. This is all about cognitive reframing. When you are in a season of sowing in tears, when the daily grind is just completely overwhelming, you have to deliberately recall the past breakthroughs. Just like the psalmist started by saying, remember when we were like those who dream? You have to look back at your own life and say, God came through for me back in 2018. The situation looked impossible then, and he turned it around.
It's using your history to inform your future. Like looking at a resume of God's faithfulness.
Right. It strengthens your trust because you realize God has a track record. You aren't just hoping in a vacuum. If he did it before, the precedent is already set. It tells your brain, we have survived this before, we will survive this again.
That's really good. It fights that spiritual amnesia we get when we're stressed. What's the second application?
Joy multiplies when spoken.
Oh, this goes back to the heathen seeing the work.
Yes. We need to acknowledge progress. Our notes emphasize that sharing testimony strengthens both the speaker and the listener. It actively combats that natural human tendency to only focus on what is still broken.
I am definitely guilty of that. I can have 10 things go right in a week and one single thing go wrong, and I will obsess over that one thing over dinner.
We all do it. It's the negativity bias. But this psalm models a totally different way. It starts with the celebration. He says, the Lord has done great things. When we vocalize that, when we actually tell a friend, hey, I saw a breakthrough in this area, it solidifies our own faith. It makes the joy real. And it helps the people around us who might be struggling to see their own breakthroughs.
So speak it out. Don't keep the gratitude silent. Okay, number 3.
Trusting the process. This is about honoring incremental growth.
Which is really tough in a world of Amazon Prime.
Oh,
We want same-day delivery on our spiritual growth.
we do. We want the harvest immediately after we drop the seed.
Yeah.
We want to do one workout and look like an Olympic athlete. We want to pray one single prayer and have a broken relationship fixed instantly. But Psalm 126 honors the time gap. It honors gradual transformation.
The gap between the weeping and the sheaves.
Exactly. The transition isn't instantaneous, it's a season. And realizing that helps us trust God because we stop interpreting the delay as a denial. Just because you haven't seen the sheaves yet doesn't mean God has abandoned the field. It just means you're in the growing season.
That is a very powerful reframing. Faith isn't just for the harvest. Faith is required for the sowing.
Precisely. You trust him in the dark dirt, not just when you're standing in the golden field.
That leads perfectly into the final application, which I think is actually the most poignant one from our source material, persevering through emotional labor.
This is the sowing in tears applied directly to modern life. The sources list some specific examples that I think hit really hard. Parenting, caregiving, rebuilding a marriage after a massive breach of trust.
Those are definitely very heavy tasks.
They are. Take parenting, for example. It is the ultimate sowing activity. You are pouring energy, resources, and emotion into these kids every single day. And often you don't see the results for years. It's exhausting. It can be incredibly tearful. You constantly wonder if any of it is actually sticking.
Or pursuing integrity in a workplace where everyone else is cutting corners. That feels exactly like burying precious seed. You're losing an immediate advantage, hoping for a long-term payoff.
Exactly. It feels like a loss in the moment. But the promise of the psalm is that this labor is not in vain. The notes used a phrase I just absolutely loved. Patience protects hope.
Patience protects hope. Can you unpack that a little?
It's the reassurance that faithful planting always precedes the joyful harvest. If you are in a season where doing the right thing feels heavy and slow, this psalm is your anchor. It says, keep going, the sheaves are coming. The fact that it hurts right now doesn't mean you're doing it wrong.
I think that's the key. We tend to think pain means stop. This is pain might just mean sowing.
Exactly. The struggle might actually be the primary evidence that you are doing something incredibly valuable.
Well, we have covered a lot of ground today in just 6 short verses. We've gone from the laughter of deliverance, that amazing dream-like state, to the desperate prayer for the flash floods in the desert, and finally to the hard, dirty work of sowing in tears.
It really is a journey from memory to work to promise.
And I think that's what makes this text so durable. It doesn't pretend life is always easy. It fully acknowledges the tears. But it also refuses to let us believe that sorrow is permanent.
That's the final thought I really want to leave the listener with today. Based on everything we've read in our deep dive, no season of sorrow has the final word. The psalm honors the tears, it gives them space, it treats them as totally real, but it never surrenders the joy. The joy is the destination. The harvest is the guarantee.
That is a really powerful place to land. So here's the question we want to leave you with today. We want you to actually answer this for yourself, maybe write it down or talk about it over dinner tonight. How will you apply this information in your life right now? Specifically, where are you sowing in tears?
Right. Identify that area where you are working so hard but seeing no immediate results. And ask yourself, am I still sowing, even through the tears? Are you keeping the seeds moving, trusting that the harvest is inevitably coming?
Think about that this week. If you enjoyed this deep dive and you want to get more practical tools for applying these kinds of insights to your daily life, we would really love for you to support us. You can do that by joining our mailing list.
Yes, please do. You can find us at https://bit.d/practicaladvice. We send out resources that help you dig deeper into the exact stuff we talk about here.
That's https://bit.bit to practical advice. Go sign up. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. We'll see you on the next deep dive.
Take care, everyone.